Very good evening to all of you. Mr. Piyush Kaushik, Senior Vice President of the Council of the Indo-European Chamber of Commerce, Mr. Balaraman, Director of the National Institute of Wind Energy, distinguished members of the Madras Chamber of Commerce, the Indo-European Chamber of Commerce, distinguished invitees, ladies and gentlemen. I am aware that we are running behind schedule by 1 hour. I am aware that my esteemed panelists and myself stand between you and dinner. Having said that, this is a very important concept which we are going to deliberate upon today. The person introducing the panel made my job much easier because it was supposed to be my task to introduce all of you. So that one work is out of the way. I believe that panel discussions can bring out the best. I would like to have as much time as possible for question answers. I would encourage the panelists to share anecdotes from your experiences, because anecdotes and stories are the language of the brain, they say. So these are incidences which people tend to remember for a very long time. Earlier this year, we had a heat wave in India. Agriculture output, it is estimated to have fallen by about 12 to 15%. Today morning, I was reading about Europe suffering the worst drought in 500 years. Last week, I read a Reuters report about the month-long drought in China. For the first time, certain parts of the Yangtze River system dried up. Several provinces announced total power cut and closure of industries to save power for residents. The minister in his speech did mention a lot of things happening, from tsunamis to tornadoes to unseasonal rains, floods, droughts. So today's conversation here, which we are going to have in a few minutes, I would like this conversation to be driven by the pollution which is caused by energy production and more so energy consumption. The whole process is polluting, and thereby the need for clean energy. The previous session we had the speakers, 3 of them speak about, or at least highlight, that we are going to, India has a commitment of net zero carbon emissions by 2070. Questions which come up is this sufficient to stop global warming? Today we have average global warming of about 1 degree centigrade above pre-industrialization levels. The question which comes up is it too little too late already? We have a very distinguished panel from different sectors within the renewable energy, clean energy. They are from manufacturing, they are from finance, they are from distribution. So we will like to have different perspectives from all of you. Earlier I had 1 hour for this session. So I budgeted about, on an average, 12 minutes for each one of you. Now, Mr. Kuti says it should be about 3 to 5 minutes. We will do our best to keep you engrossed. Anybody believes that this is less interesting than the dinner waiting there, just raise your hand, we will stop. Okay, a deal?
I think that's a good deal.
Good deal. Okay, we will start with Mr. Radhakrishnan. Mr. Radhakrishnan Ramachandran, that's the full name. I would like to request you to share your insights into the implementation of wind energy projects, the scope, the challenges, and the future of this industry in India.
Good evening all. Thanks for this opportunity. First of all, this question is out of syllabus.
This was not marked for me for the panel, but I would like to take up this question because this is where I have been all through my career. Wind energy has been one of the primary source of renewable energy. We don't want to call it more as renewable energy or clean energy. We want to call it as responsible energy. With the word responsibility comes in a lot of more responsibilities, behavioral change, and lot many things. So when it comes to responsible energy, wind energy is the major driver for that. And when it comes to the future of wind energy, the future is very bright. It was not the case 10 years before when one of the speaker was saying that when the accelerated depreciation was there were a lot of investors. Then there was a time when the accelerated depreciation was completely removed. The GBI was removed. But still, the industry was growing thanks to the climate change, whatever has happened, which has driven this industry to go forward. So the future is bright for the industry, and it is the need of the hour for us to become more responsible and to invest more on renewable energy. When it comes to challenges, yes, the scarcity of land, availability of potential land, as Dr. Balram was mentioning that when the technology improves, yes, we will be able to gain more energy out of it. Like bigger rotor diameters, hub heights getting increased to 150 meters. But having said this, with all these technology advancements, do we have the infrastructure for this? That is becoming a huge challenge, especially when it comes to land, when it comes to the evacuation infrastructure, and when it comes to the road transport. So these are all the three key areas where we are trying to work on to improve, and this requires a lot of support from the government, especially for acquiring land, because that is very much primary, and without which there will be a lot of cost overruns, the targets will slip, and which will create more impact on the environment. So I keep it short here, and let's move on to the next.
We will come back to you with more questions. We next have Mr. Bala Venkatakutti. He has been introduced, but I was quite impressed by his profile. His career has meandered through various sectors, various positions, and various industries. So, Mr. Balakutti, what are your insights on two issues? One is the future of digitalization in this sector, and second, the performance of investments in renewable energy companies. Something which you can tell us, which all of us can take back to our homes and implement, or at least make use of.
Yeah, thank you, Vinod. In fact, nature, it is flowing and everywhere, and we have to be all as a bankers, and we need to be maximizing our whatever possible through the investments. Now, regarding the question, digitization and the performance of investments in this renewable energy sectors. As far as investment is concerned, as you rightly mentioned, as a banker, when I started the career, we had invested in many sectors, including land, gold, stocks, and we took this renewable energy like a wind energy. Proudly, I can tell after 27 years that renewable energy is the maximum returns it is giving, and it has given a comfort of a cash flow which other investments do not provide. There has been, like I rightly mentioned, my colleague, he was saying you had a tax benefit, you had a sale tax benefit, you had a renewable energy obligation, carbon credit. There were many things the governments were introducing in the last 25 years to attract investments for a financial people like us, into the field. It has really done the wonderful return. Yes, there were some problems. The machine, these windmills are working for 25 to 40 years. In fact, I would say even it can work for 40 years. Mr. Balraman will definitely agree. Though theoretically, they all fixed it for 25 years. Like in ancient days, we used to hear in every house, you grow a cow or a plant a tree. Your future child's, when the child is born in a family, you need to do this. Today I can proudly say when a child is born, please invest some money in a renewable energy. If you cannot do it, at least buy some stocks of a renewable energy company. You will see that 25 years down the line, it would have given you such a return which will take care of that kid's requirements at the point of time. So that much I felt whatever we had invested about very small amount, 1.5 crore capital we invested 27 years back. Today we were listed in BSE, our company got listed in Luxembourg, we got listed in Singapore. We are definitely looking for more with the opportunities being there. So thank you for the question. This is the best investment, I will say. And digitization, which is now happening, every part of life, we all have hand phones in our, phone is available in our hand, every person's hand. The whole industry, the whole banking, every sector is getting now kind of digitized. So the renewable energy is already started that movement. Today we are seeing a lot of, readings. We don't have to go send the people. We have drones. We have many things now which the renewable energy can make use of it. So we are definitely, seeing a future where we could manage large wind farms. Today we are talking about offshore wind farms which are going to come. Are the people going to be available to, cross the ocean like Hanumanji's and our Ramayan days to go there and monitor them? So we definitely going to be in a place where we are going to see a lot of innovations in digital world and technology space for this sector as the days are coming. And with that, I think we have a future for this industry. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Kutty. I will come back to you on the carbon credits. Your company was the first Indian company to be registered for carbon credits. So I will come back to you. I have some questions on that. We will start from the other end. We will start with Shaji. Shaji, you currently are in Omium, India, and you take care of Middle East, South Asia, and Africa. In your experience in dealing with hydrogen as a fuel, what do you think is the policy support which industry requires, and what is the scope for Indo-European Union partnerships? If you can share your views.
Yeah, thank you, Vinod. That's a wonderful question, because policy is something which comes the first when an industry has to be given a trajectory. And hydrogen is a new baby which has been heard in the last few months, maybe. Solar and wind has been seen a very huge growth in the last 10 years, but now is a time for hydrogen. Before answering that question, I will give you a context why hydrogen, because otherwise it will be a little out of context when I am talking about the policy. See, like Dr. Balraman told about the energy mix. In the country today, 20% of the energy consumed is by electricity. But 80% of the energy is still coal, oil, and gas, which is very polluting. We can change the 18% electricity into green by solar and wind. But how we will make the clean the 80% of the energy? That means we have a mammoth task in front of us. So what I believe is that hydrogen in the next 10 years will be much, much bigger than solar and wind, what we have seen in the last 10 years. But it needs huge amount of policy support from various governments across the globe. So now coming to the question of what policy support is needed. Number one is to kickstart the market. Today the green hydrogen is not economical when compared to grey hydrogen. So you have to give a support in terms of blending. So there should be a mandate by the governments to blend the current hydrogen consumption with some amount of green hydrogen. It could be 5%, it could be 10%, as the governments can afford, as the consumer can afford. But there is a necessity, that is number one, policy support which will be needed. In fact, India government is working on it. We are expecting that to be coming out any time now. That's the point number one. Point number two, what we have seen in solar and wind, especially solar, we have been hit by the import of solar modules from countries which are not very favorable for us. And what it makes us to suffer is that we are always dependent on some other country for our energy needs. So in hydrogen, we should not repeat the same mistake. Hence, the second point which I want to present is that there should be barriers. First of all, the way we brought barriers in solar modules, it was too late, but now the hydrogen is beginning. There should be barriers so that Indian manufacturers are given a boost, they are protected. Once the market is created, they should be able to produce and sell it to the Indian market. This is the second point which is required. Third is obviously the PLI scheme, the way government has come out for solar recently and for batteries. The PLI scheme should be bought in very fast so that the electrolyzer manufacturers like us, we are not waited for policy, we are not waited for market to come up, we are not waited for the PLI scheme, but there are many other companies which will be sitting on the fence to start investing into the manufacturing of hydrogen electrolyzers. So for such manufacturers, government need to bring up the PLI scheme. That's the third support needed. And finally, the fourth support. Whatever said and done, green hydrogen can be produced with the input as solar and wind as the clean source of energy, which will split the water into hydrogen and oxygen. But we need to understand that solar is not available 24/7, wind is not available 24/7. Hence, the next option is to put a lot of batteries, but batteries are going to be super expensive and super space will be needed. So at least in the beginning, government should allow banking of energy. That means you can produce in the morning solar, but use it in the night through a banking mechanism from the grid. So that's the fourth important, most important support which the industry will need. So I think I will not take much time. These are the four policy support which will be needed. I think I answered all the points, or I missed something, I think.
We will come back to you, yes. I will certainly come back to you on microgrids, which the Honorable Minister also spoke, and I see that you have worked on almost 500 of those. So I will come back to you during the next session, next round. But now I will go to Dr. Subramaniam. For some reason I feel you are a special speaker here because you happen to be from Cornell, my alma mater.
Thank you.
What caught my eye was Dr. Subramaniam has 50 patents to his credit, which means he has done a lot of original research, original thinking, and he has patented those ideas. So Dr. Subramaniam, just give us an insight into what inspired you to do so much of original research and come up with so many patents. And while you explain to us, also please speak to us, give us some insights into the field of clean energy, especially the fuels of the future as they call it. Hydrogen, Shaji did mention. Anything else you would like to add to that?
Sure. Yeah, I'll keep the portion about myself very brief because I want this to be about the topic of energy. But thank you for the introduction. So I am Subramanian, Senior Vice President at Ashok Leyland, in charge of all the new technologies in the automobile sector for heavy vehicles for Ashok Leyland, which is a very interesting responsibility for a non-automotive person, because I actually just joined the company a year ago, and I used to, before this, I was the CEO of an energy company. Before that, I was a scientist in the micro and nanotechnology area in the US. So it's been a huge number of career shifts, but I believe that the science is all the same. It's pretty much the same basics, and I like to go back to the fundamentals when looking at a gigantic problem like energy, right? Sometimes we tend to forget the fundamentals. And I think that's very, very important. The experiments in science that were done 200, 300 years ago, when science as we know it today was just evolving, right? And I'd like to take you back a little bit to your high school days, just to explain the concept of energy, right? To me, all energy is solar. There's no other form of energy. That's the way I think about it, right? The solar, because obviously direct energy from the sun is solar energy. Wind energy is also solar because it comes due to differential heating, right? So ultimately it is the sun's energy that makes the wind flow. fossil fuel is also solar, right? Maybe it's a controversial statement to make, but just to explain that, I mean, in very, very simple terms, when you burn carbon, you get carbon dioxide. And that reaction, that chemical reaction, is an energy-giving reaction, right? So any kind of fossil fuel is essentially carbon-based. It's actually hydrocarbon-based, but I'm oversimplifying and calling it carbon-based. So when you burn a fossil fuel, carbon becomes carbon dioxide. That's an energy-giving reaction, and therefore you get energy out of it. You use this energy for electricity, to run a vehicle, whatnot, right? If you want to reverse that, you have to give energy, the same amount of energy that you got by burning carbon to get carbon dioxide. So if you want to reverse carbon dioxide, get it back to carbon, which is a lot of this is what net zero is about, right? And I don't want to sound skeptical here, but nature took millions of years to reverse carbon dioxide to carbon. Process we all know is photosynthesis. So the energy that was needed to do that came from the sun, right? So every plant on the planet for millions of years took the energy from the sun, right? And the energy input was what enabled reversal of carbon dioxide into carbon. We took about 200 years, 300 years max, to use up all that fossil fuel, which was converted from the sun's energy, right? And convert the carbon back to carbon dioxide. So talking about net zero is a huge nightmare, because what nature did over millions of years, and I look to nature as the most efficient system out there, right? And if we are trying to beat it by doing the reversal faster, to me that's impossible, right? So we have to look at the best alternatives here, right? So if you look at renewables or any other form of energy, which as I said is ultimately, any form of energy is solar, right? So fossil fuel is solar because it came through photosynthesis, but it came through a very slow process, right? And for us to say that we can kind of reverse that in a short time scale is, to me, impossible. So to me, any form of viable energy has to, of course, include energy generation. It also has to include storage, right? Like Mr. Shaji John hinted, storage is a vital component, right? Nature stored energy as carbon. Right? It stored energy as fossil fuels. That's what it was doing. So the millions of years of photosynthesis was taking all the sun's energy and finding a way to store it chemically as a fuel, right? The other great storage system we have today is batteries, which evolved in the last 200 years. But we all know that battery technology is hugely wanting. There are orders of magnitude kind of gap in terms of cost, weight, the chemicals that go into it. So it's not at all the right answer for storage, right? The other storage technology is hydrogen, right? So the universe uses hydrogen as a fuel. Every star is using hydrogen. Of course, we don't use hydrogen the same way. We don't do fusion with it. If we could do that, then all our problems are solved, right? But then we are also looking at the same fuel that nature uses, but to do a slightly different kind of thing where you convert hydrogen to water, right? But hydrogen to me is not a fuel at all, because to me a fuel has to have an energy content, right? So if you take petrol or diesel or something like that, it has an inherent energy content which was given by nature. So you're burning that, you're extracting energy out of it, right? Hydrogen is something that is not freely available on the planet. It's available in the universe, but not on the earth. So you have to put in the energy from somewhere else. Yeah, you have to find the energy, put it into water, split the water, therefore make hydrogen, right? So to me, hydrogen is a storage medium, right? It's not a fuel, because a fuel has to be an inherent source of energy. But it's a great storage medium, right? Today, if you compare it to the best lithium battery, hydrogen can store about 3x of energy per kg. So it's a fantastic storage medium. So if you look at it as a better lithium battery, it actually makes a lot of sense, right? So I think our focus has to be on the word is fuels, but then the right term to me is energy storage medium, right? So how do you take all the energy that you can generate, store it in a battery or store it as hydrogen so that you can put it to the right kind of use, right? So today we are talking about all kinds of new fuels. Some of them are still fossil fuel based, like natural gas and certain other biofuels, which essentially are carbon based and will generate carbon dioxide. But very soon after that is hydrogen and electricity, right? And to me, hydrogen is simply a storage medium for electricity. It's a battery, right? And if you look at it like that, it makes a lot of sense, right? So therefore, I was a non-believer in hydrogen. When I kind of changed my thought process, I became a believer in hydrogen because of this. Of course, you still have to solve the problems of storage, transport. Not easy to do it. Hydrogen is the smallest molecule. It leaks everywhere, right? You have to store it under pressure, which is, again, causes it to leak more, or you have to liquefy it, which means you need cryogenics. All very complicated, but assuming, hopefully, technology will solve all this, right? But if you do it, hydrogen is a great answer, right? But is it net zero? I mean, don't ask me that question, right? So to me, nothing is net zero, right? The only net zero process is what the star does in giving us energy.
A lot of things I learned was through a series of books called For Dummies. And the explanation you gave was very simple, easy to understand. Everything is solar. And I see my good friend here from the business line. Maybe he is writing a headline for tomorrow's newspapers. Dr. Subramaniam says, fossil fuel is solar, go use it. But thank you very much for that explanation. Now I would like to hear from our panelist, Mr. Ramachellappan. He has almost 4 decades of experience in the electricity, storage, renewable energy businesses, a well-known voice in the industry. Sir, what is your view of digitalization of green energy, challenges and the scope of this for India Inc. as we transition towards clean energy?
Dr. Vinod and the respected audience, so digitalization is very vital, very important. Like Mr. Bala spoke about in the beginning, everything got to be digitalized now. And when we come to specifics of clean energy and then digitalization combined to it, it gives us a lot of advantage. So we have 3 stages of energy flow. One is the generating stations, and then transmission and distribution, and then utilization or consumption point. So at the generation stage, we have to have a lot of digitalization, use of SCADA EMS packages, highly integrated net-ready situation. It's very important. The entire scheme, right from generation, transmission, distribution, and then the utilization, have to be completely net-ready. It has its own distinctive advantages. So let's talk about power generation area. So we must know what is the demand, and according to the demand, we have to generate power. And then if it is a vast field of solar parks, certainly we need drones to see the effectiveness of all the modules are free from soil, and then they are good to generate power and make use of the electricity to its full potential. So then they control and make the drones flow all over is very important. And then the power generation by every single panel, every single string, and then the combiner boxes back to the inverters, and then to the power station. Then we uplink it through a transmission line to the point of coupling or the substation that further puts the power up there in the grid. So because energy is money, it's very important. And when it comes to solar or wind, you cannot lose even a minute of the time in the production of energy. So you have to have high level of digitalization to check and to be able to clear the faults, if any, and then make sure the power flow is at its best. We can't ask the sun to do overtime. You know, in an industry, if the machine is down, we can ask the people to do overtime, and the production is somehow achieved. But once we lose solar hours or wind hours, it's gone. We can't ask the wind, Varna Bhavan, to flow again or sun to come back and do overtime. Impossible. So every minute, every second is a energy generating hour and a business hour and a money is involved. So a lot of digitalization is important to check that everything is in order. You are able to fix the faults in case there are any faults, and then that's one part of it. And then putting it in the grid, we have to make sure that the grid has the acceptance level and we are within the safe operating windows to inject power properly, and then the transmission takes place, and then there are transmission losses. There could be transmission losses by nature, there could be transmission losses by mistakes or improper management. The nature-related transmission losses, we can't do much about it except that we can do the design. It could be line-to-line capacitance or ground-coupled capacitance in the transmission lines. But it is, sometimes it becomes inevitable, but what is preventable is to make sure the connectivity is all proper, and then the design parameters are within the safe operating area, and the right mix of conductors, conductor losses, and sizing of everything. There again, we could, with the digitalization, we could, measure the losses and then fix the losses within the acceptable parameters. Coming to the point of utilization, yes, we need smart meters. We need to have well-educated, well-informed users. That's very important. That's the benefit of digitalization. So you can program your loads to become on during the lean hours, for example. See, I can program my washing machines, dishwashers, and all those things at 2 a.m. as long as they do not disturb my sleep. So program it in such a way that, the lean, we call it C5 in Tamil Nadu. During the tariff hour C5, you can program all such loads. So again, the digital technology helps. And by digitalization, the generation plant knows what is the consumption, and the consumers know what is the power available for them during the month or during the week or during the day. Accordingly, they can consume their quota without exceeding anything. Not jamming the grid during 6 to 9 p.m. or 6 to 10 p.m. That has to be avoided. So by digitalization, we have absolute control over all these aspects of generation, transmission, distribution, and then utilization. So I think I stop at this point, and we can continue further.
Digitization is about being able to track micro monitor in real time every aspect from production to transmission to consumption. So that is one take home. I think we can, I don't know whether we have programmable washing machines and things like that, but
Your mobile can control that.
okay, the mobile can control that. Okay, now I have a few questions for the panel. I will start with Dr. Kutty because I said we will speak about carbon credits. And I was reading an article recently, the title being Carbon Credits, Can We Offset Our Way Out of Climate Change? I read that Elon Musk earns about $518 million per year through carbon credits, and that is how he is able to subsidize the Tesla cars. So, is carbon credits, the whole concept, a financial jugglery which helps the global north versus the south, global south argument, or does it really help in saving energy and transition towards a clean energy regime?
Okay, so yes, everything can be looked at from money terms for the wealth. But to put it from a normal way, it is basically an encouragement mechanism to make people to be aware of, you should not pollute the environment. The carbon neutral, world has to be reaching. For that, a carbon credit mechanism was, introduced maybe about 15 years back. It was, we were proud that we could, work on it and became the first company. But then subsequently it has also got its own things. It depended on creating a market for a pollutant creating people paying for the somebody who is cleaning it up in a simple way. So a person who is running an industry contributing like, so much of effluent wastage into the river system, our environment, he should be somewhere asked to pay for that as a separate penalty or a charge, which indirectly can come and help a person who is investing in renewable energy and cleaning the whatever, the mess created in our own system. So that way the carbon credit mechanism was working between, like a developed countries and developing countries like India, where they were asking to promote a lot of investments here. But subsequently, many of the colleagues here will agree. Suddenly the, some US as a power which withdrew from that, and then they started, then the economic recession. What happened if there is no industry itself doesn't perform? So they were only looking at one sector of the globe or the pollution creating enterprises to pay for it. It should have been now in future, if you look at it, it's going to be the whole people, every home, every person who is polluting has to pay somewhere. So slowly that movement is coming. So we have to live with this kind of a thing. It is if you look at like a trader angle, yes, you have opportunities to make money. You can buy them. When there is a market, then definitely there is accumulator. There is a various form of holding them. Even there, like today in India is already talking about renewable energy obligation. They were trying to impose the condition for the corporates to use the renewable energy, or at least pay a penalty for it. So there is a separate tax system. There is a separate market is being. We have energy exchanges now. It is going to be growing, but today maybe their experiment phase is over. So I look forward more innovating actions coming up in this space for rewarding or helping both the sides. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kuti. I have a question for Dr. Subramaniam. You mentioned that net zero is a myth, and only nature can achieve it, not from the human process. Who are the stakeholders in this entire clean energy thing, universe? And any tips you can give to our audience on what role they can play in this transition?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, it's a huge question, because I think there are a lot of stakeholders in this process. But maybe I can illustrate a couple of examples. There's one person in the audience who reminded me of another previous panel discussion I was in. But I'll make that point again, because I think it might be interesting to the audience, right? So if you take, again, automotive, right? Since I'm from the automotive industry, people think of fuels as a big culprit, right? Because you burn a fuel, the process of burning is what generates nitrogen oxides, it generates carbon dioxide, it generates all the nasty stuff, right? But if you actually look at it, and if you were to use maybe some digitalization, some other techniques to characterize what it is that really pollutes in an automobile case, you will find that fuel actually has a minor role to play, which is a very interesting fact. And the reason is basically Newton's law, right? To take you back to high school again, force equals mass times acceleration, right? I'm sure everybody, whether you liked physics or not, has gone through this one simple equation, F equal to ma, right? So there are two things in that equation. There's mass and there's acceleration, right? So mass is a big deal. Today, vehicles are made of steel and they are just very heavy. So the amount of overhead you carry, right? I mean, so one person sitting in a car is essentially, the mass of that person is insignificant. The mass of the vehicle that you're carrying, right, is what really changes the game there. But let's set aside mass for a second, because the whole auto industry today is dependent on steel, and it will take some time for it to discover new materials and move there, right? The other parameter is acceleration, right? And that's a very profound parameter, because a lot of us have studied this but have forgotten about it, right? What Newton tried to tell you 200 years ago was the state of rest and the state of uniform motion are equivalent. It's only acceleration that matters. That's Newton's first law. It says state of rest, state of uniform translatory motion. If you remember your old textbook, right? I'm not trying to teach you physics here, but But again, just let me repeat that. State of rest is equivalent to the state of uniform motion, which means that motion at constant speed is equal to rest. Only acceleration matters, right? So if you think of a perfect world for a second, right? I mean, we are all in Chennai, you have to get to Bangalore, let's say 350 kilometers from here, right? What physics tells you, what science tells you is if you accelerate here, you start driving in your car, you accelerate, takes you 30 seconds, 1 minute to go from 0 to 80 kilometers an hour, right? The rest of the ride, if you travel at constant speed, should be free, should consume zero energy, because there is no acceleration. So only acceleration matters, right? So if you don't accelerate, you don't consume energy, right? So whether it's an electric vehicle where you're consuming energy from the battery, or whether it's a petrol diesel vehicle where you're consuming energy from the fuel, right? And this may be hard to digest but this is the fact. This is this was the genius of Newton, that he said that anything moving at a constant speed does not consume energy because it's equivalent to a state of rest, right? So what is the big deal? So the unit kilometers per liter is what has put this idea in our brain that to travel a certain number of kilometers, you need a certain number of liters, right? I think that unit itself is wrong, because the fuel consumption has no connection to how far you go. Okay, to first order, I'm ignoring a few things like friction and air resistance and all that. Keep it simple, right? So this is really true, which is why all these concepts like Hyperloop and all that are getting close to this ideality, where you only need that initial kick, in other words, acceleration. Then once you attain your speed, for the rest of your journey, wherever you're going, zero energy consumption, free, right? So we have to go back to some of these basics, right? So in other words, if you just remember this one point, it's all about acceleration, right? Which means changing your speed. Every time you brake, you have to accelerate again. Now that's the bane. If you have a high traffic situation, you keep on braking. Therefore, you keep on accelerating again. If you have a toll booth, you brake. You have to accelerate. If you have potholes on your road, you brake. If you have a speed breaker, you brake. Right? So braking is essentially acceleration. It's the opposite of acceleration. It's the deceleration, basically. So every time you brake, you have to accelerate to come back to speed. That step is what consumes energy. Right? So if you look at a lot of the frills, right? So leave aside fuels for a second. Even let's assume that we run on fossil fuels forever, right? If you work on the other frills, if you have the best roads, if you have the best traffic management, right? If you remove toll booths, I know that's an ideality, but, right? So you will have a situation, you could have a situation where you almost minimize braking and therefore minimize the need to accelerate again in your travel, right? And I don't know, this is sounding like magic, but this is the truth. This is what 200 years of science, and Newton's equation is the only equation that talks about moving objects. Everything else comes from that, right? That's the only fundamental equation, right? So, for example, you could, with all the electronics coming into the vehicle, right? And I'm sure a bunch of you took a taxi from the airport to the hotel, right? And a lot of taxi drivers, they give pickup, brake, give pickup, brake, right? It's irritating. I don't know if they like to drive like that or if the road conditions are making them drive like that. But let's say you put an electronic system with all the intelligence that's coming into vehicles that limits acceleration, that maybe sees ahead. And if there is a vehicle in front of you at a certain distance, it knows you're going to brake anyway. And then doesn't let you accelerate, therefore. Things like that, right? So there is so much that's happening. There is hope, right? So it's not about burning fossil fuels and saying that, yeah, here are the emissions, right? Which is what ultimately comes down to net zero. So here comes down to the stakeholder question. Who are the people who can make the roads better? Who are the people who can do amazing traffic management so that you travel from home to work without braking, right? Those are the questions that science is asking us to ask, right? And we have forgotten all that in some sense. Everybody learned it in some textbook and said, okay, that's it, right? And at that point, I don't know how well the teachers taught it to us, but this is the essence of what Newton wanted, right? So I answered your question a little tangentially, but I think it drove home the point, yeah. Yeah, but I think the stakeholders are not just the people who decide, is it going to be hydrogen, is it going to be a biofuel, is it going to be, but somehow we have a one-track mind thinking about that. There is so much, in fact, that is, I would say, a second order effect. The first order effect is everything that I mentioned, right? And if that is solved, somehow we are not looking at the primary problem. We're looking at some side effects here and there, right? And somehow our brain, because of the unit kilometers per liter, is trained to think that to go a certain number of kilometers, you need a certain number of liters, or for an electric vehicle, kilometers per kilowatt hour, right? So I just wanted to ingrain this in the audience. If there's one takeaway, please, so that you can remember this, right? It's not about fuel. Fuel is one small variable in the whole equation, right? So there are some second order effects. There's tires and there's air resistance and there's some friction and stuff like that. Yes, we have to worry about those things because yes, that consumes energy depending on how far you travel. But to me, that's the second order effect, right? Why are we worrying about those things rather than think of the main thing? Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Doctor. I will remember the solar, everything is solar, and now I will remember everybody is a stakeholder. Burning the fuel is the second stage. How efficiently it is done is the first stage. So we are all stakeholders.
So the quality of the road and the quality of the driver, I think those are the two biggest. And we can't leave these to chance. I mean, given that there are smarts, I think we can start controlling some of these parameters.
We must have the environment minister and the highways minister in one. That's one takeaway. But it was very, very clear. The concept was very clear. Thank you. I have a question for Mr. Chellappan. You have been in leadership position in many industry bodies. So what, in your opinion, should be the role of a chamber like the Madras Chamber or the EU Chamber or any of these industry bodies in this whole transition towards clean energy journey? What should they do? Should they have sensitization programs, training programs? I mean, what in your opinion would a chamber have to do?
See, the chamber within the state, let's first talk about, they have to have necessarily a good connect between the stakeholders. That is I would say there are three important people: the policy makers, the developers, and then the technology providers. For all the three to come together, there have to be clean policies and irreversible or steady policies. What is good for the state, what is good for the industries, what is good for the economy, and what is good for every single stakeholder is well known to the local chambers. Like our Mr. Keshavan very brilliantly spoke this evening. He talked about very nicely about several things. It's all by experience. He's a right and a very apt gentleman for the Madras Chamber of Commerce, no doubt. It's not that others are not, but he stands tall, quite tall on that. So all that we need is for the protection of the local environment, economy of the state. At the same time, every single stakeholders in the state, various forms, it can be finance, technology, education, medicine, everywhere. So we need to have first very important clean policies. Coming to chambers now, it's a very clear illustration today. Dr. Renu Shom and the team, Mr. Kaushik and the entire team, they have had a very good handhold with MCCI to make this thing happen. Okay, what this forum can do it for clean energy, that's what is being witnessed right here. But most importantly, when we talk about India Inc., pronouncing a lot of things on the climate change and then the net zero by 2070, and then there is a lot of things being talked about. And the major two initiatives, if I could recall here, is the Climate Finance Boardroom Initiative by India Inc. and also the Electric Mobility Boardroom Initiative. Who can bring that to the happening places and then make it happen? That's very important. So chambers play a vital role because they connect the partners from the either it is technology or financial investment or any other form of support needed for the industry, the connect from overseas is easily doable through chambers. That's where European Union has done remarkably so many partner finding and then tying up with industries, etc. So that is one part. So the overseas fund comes to India or overseas technology comes to India. So that's very important. When we talk about, for example, enabling climate finance flows, it's very important. KfW funding is a classical example from Germany. And likewise, there are so many fund houses from other countries coming to India, Canadian Pension Fund, for example. But for those funds, the development cannot happen so fast. So who are the bridges? The chambers are the immediately available low-hanging fruits in terms of bridging between the overseas fund houses to the happening places to countries like India where finance is a constraint today. People say there are a lot of money in the market, but still, the investors still are skeptical to invest in renewable energy. Thanks to Bala, who said, invest in solar energy company or a renewable energy company. Maybe Mr. Bala will, that's a good motivation. But however, a lot of financing is required. So with the support of chambers, hand-holding with the local bodies and chambers like Madras Chamber or any other chamber for that matter, it's very important. Secondly, it's very, very important point that I would like to touch upon here. See, we are all talking about imports, quite a bit of foreign exchange going out and then a lot of imports happening. And then today, as a country, India is suffering for want of semiconductor, wafers, and anything in semiconductor because we have no semiconductor fabs, unfortunately, in India, which has been a need of the hour even 20 years back. China has 80 plus gigawatts of semiconductor fab. And we have so many institutions and solid state physics, we have Electronic Corporation of India, we have Bharat Electronics, we have so many things, but unfortunately we don't have any fabs here. So this is where tying up with the local chambers and then European Union or any other leading chambers of different developed countries, we should find way to bring solar or, not necessarily solar, semiconductor fabs that will help really microelectronics, power electronics, drives, industrial requirements, and then the complete bandwidth of semiconductor requirements. Without semiconductors, the world is going to be halted. That's for sure. Without semiconductors, none of us can even go out of this hotel. So semiconductors are going to play such a vital role. So the chambers can play a major role in bringing bridging those gaps. Thank you, Dr. Vinod.
Thank you, sir. I have a question which I think I will ask you over dinner.
Sure.
I thought semiconductor fabs take a lot of water and a lot of electricity. So will that help us achieve net zero? I don't know, but I will have a discussion with you. We have just a few more minutes to take two questions. So I will put two questions to two panelists, open the floor out quickly for questions from the audience, if any, then we have dinner. Just a moment. I have a question for Shaji. You have experience in microgrids, and the speakers in the earlier session said every home could be a microgrid, a nanogrid.
Yes.
I think the Honorable
Dr.
Director
Balram.
said so. What is a microgrid and how can we have a microgrid in our house?
Yeah.
I mean, please tell us, so we are interested.
Yes, so I think Dr. Balraman has already hinted us. He told about the concept of prosumer. That means that you produce your energy where you want to consume. And that is where we are coming to. Each house can produce its energy and consume itself. That is called prosumer. Now, practically feasible or not feasible is debatable. Or when it will become feasible is a question mark, but it is going to happen. So, but today in this world, what we have done 500 microgrids in L&T, Larsen & Toubro when I was there, were electrifying the villages which had never seen electricity in the full life of 70 years after independence. So those villages, we have gone and electrified it through a microgrid, which means that a set of 50 houses in a village, we will have a solar system where we will have a small wind system and we will have a battery storage, and those generating system is connected very locally to the various houses so that they can enjoy the electricity and they enhance the quality of life. So that is the concept of microgrid. Now, why it is required? Because it is very efficient. Somebody told that if you transmit the power for long distance, I think Chalapan Saab told, the technical loss is 9%. But in India today, the loss can go up to 25, 30, or in some state it is 40%. So that is a different story. So to avoid that kind of losses, if you are having a microgrid, you will be very efficient, number one. Number two, the energy security. The security of energy will be there. You don't have to depend any far-fetched places. So this is the concept, but I will sum it up with one final word. It should not be microgrid. It should be smart microgrid, right? Which goes with our theme of clean energy and digitalization. A combination of these two is called a smart microgrid, which means it will help you not only in energy, it will help you in trading with your neighbors, it will help you in internet connection through the microgrid, it will give you communication to the world. You can use the same microgrid, and it could also give entertainment. So all package put together is called smart microgrid. Thank you.
Thank you, Shaji.